Good morning, everybody. My name is Vikas Saini. I'm a cloud architect with Google Cloud. I've been with Google Cloud for about 4 years now. And just as Ron explained, Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, we live in a hybrid world. Using my laptop, that microphone, all these things tell us one thing, is that there is no single solution for any one problem. People have their own choices for how they want to solve those problems, how they want to address those certain problems. And funny enough, that's also the topic for my presentation today. It's basically the world we live in, which is the hybrid multi-computing world. How do we actually do a single pane of glass, single management, single way of managing our application development using the single pane of glass? And that's where we'll talk about a solution that some of you may have heard of. It is called Anthos. So we'll talk a little bit at a high level, what it is, how it can actually help, what are the things it provides for us. And then I'm going to, towards the second half, quickly show you the console. I'll pull up the Google Cloud console, show you a couple of things that we'll talk about in the presentation. So before we actually kick starts, let's just talk about the clouds, right? The majority of cloud providers. What were the things that cloud was really good at when it first started? So the first wave of cloud was excellent at infrastructure, right? So we were looking at, well, how can I quickly spin up a VM? How can I quickly automate the deployment? But that's quickly spinning up, as it talks here, infrastructure as a code, writing my Terraform scripts. How can I quickly enable my IT teams to start building applications? Give them the environment, which typically used to take 3 to 6 weeks. Cloud brought it down to a matter of minutes. You could quickly provision the environment, have the security built in. There were various things. The big one that I remember, and some of us remember, was a 12-factor authentication, which was a big thing at the time, is how you build applications. Is the cloud secure enough? And those were the things that we would always talk about. And then we would have this concept of center of excellence around the governance models. We would have governance models that, hey, this is how you use cloud. These are how things work. And that was a great first step for cloud infrastructure. As things evolved, as we got more and more used to the cloud platforms, other questions came into being. Like, what else can cloud do? What are the things that cloud provides us now that infrastructure didn't provide? And this is where the sort of the second generation of cloud comes in, and which is all about the applications. So now we're not provisioning infrastructure every time we have a new environment. We can leverage the same infrastructure, same methodology on how we deploy applications. We also trying to figure out is, now that we have the infrastructure, what about all the other things? How does IT manage the governance policies, the security policies around it, the namespaces around our building? We also try to get away from batch processes and get more into streaming. So IoT's been around for a while, but how does that, from an event-driven process, how does that help us basically drive more event-based processing systems? When things get triggered in a certain system, how does that affect everybody else? Rather than having to make calls back and forth, how can we make that process more efficient? And then this is the big one, which is the consistent connected clouds. At this point, it's clear that the world we live in is hybrid. So there is not one cloud that we can all agree on is the future. We have multiple cloud providers, all great players in the industry that are doing great work. And it's become pretty clear that whether you're deploying on-prem, on a public cloud, private cloud, that you'll have to manage this hybrid cloud world that we live in. And the last thing is, what it mentions here is SRE, or Site Reliability Engineering. This is essentially basically a way of managing the life cycle and of the development, but then also the operations on day 2. How do we quickly figure out, identify where the problems are? How do we quickly resolve them? What is the best way to make sure that those problems don't happen again? And it's basically a work stream in itself. So we'll quickly touch on that. So why did we have to go this path? things were going pretty well with the infrastructure. We had already mastered the art of doing automation with the infrastructure. Why did we feel like the clouds had to come to this level? And the answer is around velocity. We all are getting pressure to do things faster. We're all getting pressure to work smarter and not harder. And this was even before pandemic. Pandemics only made it exponentially different or bigger. But we all had the same questions even before, is, well, how can we deploy the application faster? Businesses asking us questions is, how can we move faster? And so some of people like myself who are in IT always have this struggle of, well, I know you want to move fast, but are we making sure that we follow all the consistent policies that the IT has made up? Is the system secure enough? And it's not that we are trying to push the business back, or it's just we want to make sure that this doesn't come back and haunt us in 6 months when things go wrong, and then somebody has to take the blame for it. There's also questions around consistency versus scale. How can you make things consistent if you're constantly doing development, deploying software, don't have enough time for lifecycle development? How do you make things faster and still get that velocity to business while keeping that consistent IT policy infrastructure? And that's been a challenge that we all face every day. And then, of course, the technology, which is getting more and more towards, I may need something now, I have a cyclical business, things go up and down in my business, so how do I make sure that the infrastructure is ready for that? And I'm not putting a lot of CapEx into my systems. And this is where I'll talk a little bit more today about what Cloud Anthos. So what Anthos is basically, to really simplify, it's a Kubernetes platform where you can manage your Kubernetes platform. But the thing that's different about Anthos is that even though we like you to run on Google Cloud, we don't force you to run on Google Cloud. Because we realize that there are chances that there are certain applications that will never move to the cloud. There are chances that you've already selected another cloud provider, that's working for you, and you may not want to run this on Google Cloud. So having that consistent Kubernetes platform, a managed Kubernetes platform that actually provides the hybrid multi-cloud approach is what Cloud Anthos is. And the promise of build it once, run it anywhere is essentially what Anthos actually promises. So how does this actually work? So the idea behind this is that you build your applications once in a container format that you feel like is optimized for deployment, and then at that point you can deploy them anywhere. You can deploy them on-prem. If you have a private cloud on-prem, if the application that has data that's sensitive, that the security won't let you move, you can do that. If you've already made a decision to go with one of the other cloud providers, then fair enough, you can run those applications on that cloud. But the big thing here is that you manage your applications from anywhere, which means you still get that consistent view regardless of where you've deployed the applications. And that's the day two operations, is like, rather than having to go to these 5 different UIs and different consoles to manage it, now I have a single pane of glass to manage all my applications. Essentially, what this basically does is that even though the applications are decentralized in various places, the management is centralized. You still get a single view of all your applications in a single pane of glass. And so what's the benefit of it? I'm providing the same security policies that my company set up for me, same network policies that my company's already established. I'm getting the same telemetry data that is a standard that my IT has told that I should do. And on top of that, I'm not worried about which cloud this is deployed on or what's the infrastructure behind it. I'm more focused on getting my application right, my logic working, and then essentially having all the automated policies, network policies applied to that infrastructure. And of course, the big thing we talk about is the operations cost of day two, right? even though we are moving fast, we're moving in a different world, the pandemic has changed that. Still, most organizations believe that 72% or more of their budget is spent only on maintaining and upgrading applications. Only 28% or less is spent on new innovation, new applications every day. This also works a lot of the executive approach. Well, very few companies these days are willing to commit to one cloud. Over 69% of CIOs believe that their strategy of the future is a hybrid cloud, that they want to have multiple cloud providers and their as part of their solution. Still, a lot of organizations deploy on-prem, whether that's the financial industry, whether that's the public sector, there are even traditional industries like retail. Chances are, over the next 5 to 10 years, we would not be moving a lot of those applications to the cloud until we are comfortable that the clouds have matured even further. So this addresses that right now in operational costs. So let's dig a little bit deeper into this. So how does this actually work? So at the bottom you see, as I was saying earlier, is regardless of which cloud provider you are working with, right? You have the infrastructure already set. Chances are you've already set that infrastructure as code on how to provision the environment. And on top of that, there are things that our governance teams or IT teams are telling us. And those specifically on how you manage your clusters, how you configure them. What are your firewall outbound policies? What comes inside the organization? How do you set up the proxy for letting the traffic inside your clusters? So those are already defined. And so Anthos is basically a layer on top of that. It's basically a management layer for Kubernetes. And the reason why we're able to do this is because this is a software-based solution. So we are not based on what the infrastructure is. As long as we have access to the right infrastructure and then policies, we can actually set up the management of Kubernetes platform on Anthos. And this does provide a lot of benefits as highlighted on the right side. So of course, application management, quickly deploying application does provide some of the infrastructure automation on both the things scale up and down. If a pod is bad, it restarts that pod. All those things that you would expect from any Kubernetes platform, the management, now you can do that on any of those different providers, if you will. One thing I'll quickly point out here is that under Azure, you see an asterisk. So that's still under preview. So this is not fully done yet, but all the other things here are live. And as I said, I'll pull this up and quickly show as well, real quick. Thankfully, the market's taken note of this. We've had some good success on the Analyst as well. So this one just came out Q1 of 2022 from Forrester. And we've had some good reviews from these. So we've gotten 4+4s out of 5 on a lot of the quick capabilities that a lot of people are looking for. Specifically, I would point out the container runtime registries, supporting product services, our breadth of offering. All of these tie back to the things I was talking about earlier, specifically around the velocity. So how can we do more with less? Whether that's just resources in terms of people, in terms of the velocity and how quickly we want to get the applications deployed. And by the way, while doing all of that, making sure that all of our security policies, our governance policies are followed. This is one step deeper into what we talked about. Typically, all of these are the things that every time we deploy an application, we have to consider. Not as a developer, but as an organization, we have to consider these things. Specifically around policy management. How do these services interact with each other? Which services are allowed to be accessed from outside the firewall versus inside the firewall? Even within the same organization, there may be certain applications that may have PII data or PCI data that you can't access from other clusters or Kubernetes clusters. And this policy management is key. Service management, how do these various services interact with each other? what is the orchestration that goes through between these services? If you're in Kubernetes, if you're in STO, basically Anthos Service Mesh is our managed STO platform, and that essentially does the same thing around managing microservice communication. And then the operations. How do I quickly figure out is the data logging, things around setting up alerts, like monitoring on the various platforms. How do I set up alerts that not just stand on Google Cloud, but then also stand on On-Prem or other public clouds? How do I bring those together in this? And then the last one on top is the application development. So the developers are now focused on developing applications, moving things faster. You can even get things from as it says, like marketplace, which is are some of the pre-built VMs that we have that you can download for running the system. So essentially, like 6 key benefits of container management that you get with Anthos is, of course, it's a turnkey solution. I've got a couple of financial customer advisors at the end I'll pull up that are actually using this, like large banks, and then also a couple of other examples. But the thing I'll point out here is that the number 4, which is the upgrade, is certainly you're letting, even though it's deployed on-prem, it's deployed on different clouds. We will or the Anthos platform will update your Kubernetes underlying platform for you. It saves a lot of time and effort for having to go through spend the IT resources upgrade that this does by itself. And then the last one is around reliability and availability, right? So if you have a single glass, you have a single place where you're storing all your telemetry data, storing all your logs, you can set up alerts on them. And those are not just IT alerts. You can set up like business metrics, custom alerts as well, to see when the application is running slow. When you're not, folks are not able to check out, if you know. The users that are on the system are abandoning the site on certain pages. A lot of those metrics that you can think of, you can actually set up in this one single pane of glass. And so this is just a screenshot, as you'll see to the right, on some of the things that if you're running Anthos on different infrastructures, you'll see. So this would be a single pane of glass where you can see, well, I've got 2 clusters running on another public cloud. I've got a couple of clusters running on-prem, and then I've got 1 or 2 running on Google Cloud, and you'll get that single pane of glass. And you'll see that right in the middle, which says that that cluster is unhealthy. So you can set up alerts to see how that can be managed, how that actually works, and then ensure that it can be resolved. This is simply the same thing about monitoring and management. So typically, a lot of the platform systems are they offer the high-level monitoring of log monitoring, things that are around logging. So having a single place where you can search all through the logs, have them set up alerts based on those metrics, and then even application performance monitoring. One thing we all know is how expensive it is to use any log consolidation tools. The ones that are in the market for a while are very expensive, and a lot of times require a lot of effort to bring all those logs from different systems together. Now they simplify them. But this is done for us as we start using Anthos. We are not doing something special. This is just a feature that you get with using Anthos clusters. And then some of the things that are part of the Google Cloud portfolio, specifically on the right under APM, is like trace and profiler. If your application is running slow, you're trying to debug them, but you don't want to take them offline. So there are certain things you can do as the application is still running, be able to set up debug parameters, better understand if there's certain components that are running slow. And that's what APM or application performance management provides for us. And this is what the security typically likes. Because we all know that as we get into critical applications, we have to get securities buy-in. Make sure that the data secure, the policies are applied. And with Anthos, you can set them at one persistent place. So any cluster that's deployed on the Anthos platform, you can enforce that those policies are followed, rather than having to individually follow them in one cloud and then go to the different cloud, if you will. Things like binary authorization is, even if something's hacked, chances are that with binary authorization, it'll realize that this is not the official code or the trusted code, and it will not let it run that code. So it helps with compliance policies as well. So Gitops is basically a component of Anthos, and this is where you can apply consistent policies. So this is where typically the security teams work. The networking team applies their logic. There's a networking team that works on the on-prem system, so they have a certain way of how they handle firewall rules, how they've established the load balancers and things. And so this folks dive right into that. So they can set up those consistent policies here as well. As I said, the nice thing is that these will apply to any on-prem cluster deployments or different clusters as well. Service management is another key benefit. A lot of times, STO being an open source platform, and it's great. I use it quite a bit, but since it's an open source, managing it, monitoring it, upgrading it can be sometimes a challenge. So Anthos Service Mesh, or ASM, is actually a platform that's built on STO for managing exactly that. And it upgrades by itself. It's a managed service. So you're only concerned about the underlying configuration on how the service should orchestrate rather than worrying about this. And then the other thing is, you'll see here on the right in the screenshot is the topology, is get a good view of how these different clusters interact together, or different pods within the cluster are interacting together. So you get a good view into the topology of how the application is deployed. And the nice thing about this is that you get a lot of things. It's like, where exactly is the unhealthy pod? What's the cost of running that pod? What is the metrics we're getting out of that pod? And you can set metrics at the entire cluster level or specific levels within the different pods, if you will. And the last thing I'll quickly point here is the cloud run for Anthos. So this one is specifically to Google Cloud. So a lot of times questions come up is, well, this is all great, but what if we just need to run this on Google Cloud and make it completely serverless? Have Google manage all this infrastructure, scaling up and down, and then essentially gives us the control to apply those security and network policies. So Cloud Run is our solution for that. It actually allows us to do just that. And we're able to do this on Google Cloud because we have more control over our infrastructure than in a public cloud or on-prem, if you know. So I know I'm running out of time, so I'll move a little fast. So at a high level, we'll come back to this, but this is basically the key benefits where Anthos typically stands. I'll quickly show up the console for you guys, and then we can wrap it up. So this is the Google Cloud Platform, if you will. So there are various applications here. One you'll see here is Anthos, which I just pulled up. And as you'll see here is that there are multiple options here. So you can deploy these clusters on GCP. So these are various options around how you want the clusters to be managed, standard autopilot. Where do you want you have a strong enough IT team that believes in managing these clusters by themselves, or do you want to offload some of that work to the Google or the Anthos platform? Similarly, there's a tab on the other clouds. As I was saying, right now we have AWS as part of our Amazon Web Services. Soon we will also have Azure, so I think we're working on that. That's in beta. And then similarly on-prem. So you can have things deployed on a vSphere, which is the VMware's management console, or bare metal. Some applications require that they stay on them by themselves without having a virtualized environment, and that's where bare metal can actually help. And if you see on the right here, there's a lot of things around management of this Anthos cluster. So there's service mesh you can set up on how you want the applications to be set up, configuration management, and then migrate to containers, because this is the place where if you have existing VMs, existing applications, and you want to migrate them to a container and then deploy them on Anthos, this is where you're able to do that. And I will also quickly show you the serverless aspect of this. So if you go down, you'll see a serverless tab, and then Cloud Run is essentially the same thing. But since we have access to the Google Cloud Airline platform, we can automate a lot of these things. So scaling up and down. One thing that's unique about Cloud Run is typically in a Kubernetes environment, you can never scale to zero, or you don't want to scale to zero because you always will have at least 1 or 2 pods running when it's off hours, just in case I need to scale up and down. Cloud Run actually allows you to scale to zero, which means that during off hours, there is absolutely no charge, but it'll scale up by itself based on things. So I'll quickly show you. So I do a create service here. So you can deploy if you have a Docker image container that you have. We'll just do the sample, which is I think the hello world. So we'll do the hello world application. You want to deploy where you want it running, and you can specify how many number of instances you want, minimum 0 or a certain number, and go as high as you want, as long as the network IPs are allocated to support it. We'll just go with 3 for now. And then this is where you can do additional things is like what kind of traffic you want to allow. Is it all internal only through the balancer? The benefit of going through a cloud balancer is you can apply additional cloud armor policies. And those policies could be like, hey, I am primarily a North American-based company. I don't want traffic coming from Asia or Europe. And Cloud Armor, you can apply those policies. You can say if the traffic's coming from a mobile device, I need an additional authentication. So there are benefits that if you go through the load balancing it provides, and essentially helps with the additional security. Similarly, you can say, I want authentication, or it's a public page. There are additional variables as well around secret management, things that that you would want to do around security. And then you just create. And this will go ahead and actually create. This one's probably going to create pretty fast because it's a small, very small footprint of container. It just says hello world. But usually it actually deploys pretty fast. And then as you'll see here, the traffic, there's a tab around traffic. So you can even split the traffic. So if you're looking to do A/B testing, setting 5 split traffic, those things can be done through the through the console here. And then you get the URL of that page, which is, it's just a simple demo like a hello world success page. And if I quickly go into the service, you can see the policies that you can actually enable. So in a lot of cases, things around binary authorization, network policies can be enabled. You can have the YAML if you want to do the YAML. If there's certain triggers you want to click, then those can be set as on when this service should be kicked in. And of course the logs and the metrics. So this metric basically says things that you probably want to do on the service. Now again, all of this also gets consolidated in that single class we were talking about on the Cloud Ops. But you could also, if you're only focused on your project and your service, you can do that here. All right. So with that, I will wrap up quickly with a couple of our public references specifically on the Anthos platform. And as you see that like telecom and financial industry, both of those industries right now are evolving, but they don't have the luxury to move everything to the cloud. And so that's where Anthos platform has been great. With that, I'll wrap up. I'm done.